about Marcus Ruiz Evans, who has been talking to us about the subject here. And I guess we're going to hear more from him right now since we've been talking to him. Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you all for letting me come out. I really appreciate this. I'm not going to put the jacket on. It's a little hot. This is the new book, California's Next Century 2.0. I passed out some business cards. These are of the old version of the book. This is the version that's actually for sale on Amazon, California's Next Century 2.0.
It's on Kindle too.
It's on Kindle and Barnes & Noble. And if you type in California's Next Century 2.0 or Marcus Ruiz Evans on any internet search engine, movies, articles, reviews, books, everything. And the videos from 17 other California cities. So I'll give you the standard speech. I'm going to make a series of radical claims. And they're going to seem too good to be true. And yes, they can't happen right now. But if we make a shift in our government, as proposed in this book, then all of the radical claims I'm about to make can actually happen. And then I'll explain how this can be and what the name of the title of the book is, why it's called California's Next Century. So first, the radical claims. One, half of your taxes removed. Two, half of the bureaucracy of running a business in California removed. The debt of California, somewhere between $8 to $25 billion, paid off. California economy jump-started. California economy made permanently recession-proof for the next 100 years. A qualitative jump in the quality of all elected and all appointed officials in California like you've never seen before. All public schools return not just to the best in America, but the best in the world. Roads, bridges, dams, seaports, airports, and levees brought up not just to the best in America, but the best in the world. College kids able to get a quality California university education without becoming massively loaded in debt. And a return to local control at the city and county level like you haven't seen since the 1960s. Let me throw in a few more. Increased international trade, increased world peace, and again a recession-proof economy here in California so that you, your kids, and your grandkids will never ever go through what you're going through right now. I know, radical. And yes, these things are not possible with the current system. But with the shift, as I'm proposing in California's Next Century 2.0, all of these things are possible. Quick history lesson to explain why. So in the next 10 to 40 years, there will be new superpowers with as much money and raw power as America has. In the last 10 years, America's been the main superpower. But in the future, we're going to have new ones who will have literally as much wealth and raw power and influence as America. Their names are going to be India, China, Brazil, Russia, and ASEAN, Southeast Asian Collective, ASEAN. So while you have one superpower now, in the near future, you're going to have 7. Here's where that becomes problematic. In the last century after World War II, America was the champion of democracy and capitalism. And that was largely because the only other option was the USSR. Communism, state control over everybody's lives, and control and planned economy. So the world kind of fell into two groups, either followed democracy and capitalism or communism. It was kind of easy for America to be the main champion at that time. But now, something happened around the late 80s and early 1990s. America became a victim of its own success. America won the Cold War, and now nobody thinks communism is a good system, not even the Chinese, or the North Koreans, or the Cubans. Everybody participates in global capitalism. So what happens in the future when America isn't the only option for democracy and capitalism, but is only one of 7? Let's complicate it a little bit further. All of these new superpowers are going to the international organizations that have kept world peace since World War II, such as the UN and IMF and G20, less. B, they're making their own international organizations of them and all their neighbor countries and trying to get kind of a new thing going where it's their UN the way they want it. And C, they're specifically banning America from participation in their new international order. Each one of the new superpowers is doing this, except for Europe. By the way, just to prove the point, Europe has more wealth than America and has had for the last 10 years. America typically doesn't talk about that. So, India wants to have their own sphere of influence where they influence all the countries in their section of the world the way America had global influence over all countries. They want to move America out and make themselves the America for their region. And they're already doing it. They're going less to the international organizations and they're making more of their own organization. Have you heard of the word trade bloc Mercosur? That's Brazil's version. China has something called the Shanghai Cooperation Council. Russia's doing one, India's doing one, ASEAN might do one, etc. The problem is that you have multiple foreign policy scholars saying that we've seen a period like this that we're going into in our recent past. The period leading up to World War I, roughly 1890 to 1910. Here's why. At that time, you had new superpowers rising. These countries had not participated in the international game. England and Italy and France had conquered parts of the world and had international economies. But now these newly formed nations, they wanted their piece of the pie, their section of the world, and their wealth, like England and France and Italy. Actually, their names were Japan, Germany, and Italy. For a while, they conquered pieces of the globe, and all the countries traded. But then one day, Germany walks out of the international negotiations in the League of Nations. Japan does the same, Italy does the same, boom, World War II. Well, World War I then too. Some people consider both of those world wars one. International foreign policy scholars are saying that the period that we're going into the future most closely resembles this period leading up to World War I and World War II. That does not mean that we're going to have World War III, but that the closest parallel that we have is that period leading up to that. And here's how this relates to California. The thing that kept world peace up until World War I and World War II, and after World War I and World War II, till basically now, was basically a place called Switzerland. If you look up international negotiations between corporations, rail yards, shipping foreign countries, almost all of the major negotiations for anything new or substantial that have been signed between corporations or nations in the last 150 to 200 years was signed in Geneva, Switzerland. The UN obviously did some, but a lot of it's still been Switzerland. Now, interestingly, in the last 2 years, the Swiss have issued 2 official reports saying they can no longer be the negotiation nexus for the world for the upcoming century the way that they were for the last century. The reason is that they just don't have the right demographics. 150, 200 years ago, Switzerland went to the European countries and said, hey, we're part German, French, Italian, and a group called Romansh. But we are a people, although we speak all these different languages and know all these different cultures. So they went to the different European nations and said, we are the physical embodiment of all of you talking and getting along together. We're living proof. And we know how you talk and we know how you think. So we should be the natural, neutral arbiter for all discussions between European powers. Europe bought it, and that's why Switzerland held this role for the last 150, 200 years. But now the world's not going to be owned by just Europe. It's going to be owned by America, Europe, India, Russia, China, Brazil, and possibly Southeast Asian collective. The world needs a new Switzerland for the next century. And the only place that can do that is a country that basically has that demographic base for the needs of the new superpowers the way Switzerland did in the last century. I look all over the world and my analysis conclusively shows this is it. This area, land, place, people, state, whatever you want to call it, this boundary of California is the only place in the entire world where you have all the peoples of the new superpowers having lived together as a people for over a century. No other place comes remotely close. So what I'm arguing is that either California picks up from the Swiss, or nobody does. And the world order's already disintegrating, so we continue to let it disintegrate, and who knows what happens. Or we step in, we become super wealthy like Switzerland, we become permanently secure, we provide the new service that the new world order does because nobody else can provide it. We save ourselves, and we save the world at the same time. That's what I'm offering. And I want to point out, hey, nobody else can do this. So if we don't do it, it's not going to be done. B, there are no plans on how to get world powers re-engaged into the UN and IMF. They literally just ignore the protests. And C, we are 5 years into this recession. We are the worst hit state in all of America. And I have quotes in here from multiple national news commentators. If you are Republican, liberal, conservative, Democrat, there are no new ideas. No party, no one is offering any new ideas on how to get us out of this recession. They are old ideas that we've talked about for the last 30 years, and yet we're in a recession the likes of which you see once a century. This is the time for new ideas, and yet there are none. I have that documented thoroughly. This is at least new. We're half a decade into trying, and it hasn't worked. Maybe now's the time for something, because otherwise we might be here in another 5 years, still stuck where we're at. I'll turn it over to questions.
Okay.
I just gotta stop. Sorry.